Hello, this is David Birch at StarPath School of Navigation with a few notes about ocean current display at windy.com. And the resource of windy.com has become really quite remarkable. And in a sense, the main things that I've found, for example, are overlaying different altitudes in the atmosphere. You can overlay these pressure maps and wind maps. You can also compare models. They have the European Community model as well as the GFS, so you can compare you can compare those. So there's a lot of wonderful features, which deserve some attention on their own later on, especially the comparison of the two models, the European Community and the U.S. GFS. However, I've recently noticed that they now have ocean currents. And so I wanted to discuss the ocean currents a little bit with our students who might be coming into taking a look at this. And I'm at this stage probably raising more questions than answering. So the data is there, but it's not clear to me yet exactly what this data is. And that's what I want to discuss, why that's uncertain, and bring up a couple other points. And then in the process, it shows several ways that you can study currents and maybe try to figure out what model it is. So first of all, when you go to if you, for example, go to the wind, let's say we go to the wind. Now, when you go to the wind, you have a timeline down here. So you can go along here and see the wind, how the wind changes over different dates, or you can run an animation and it'll actually swing through there, and it's a very beautiful display like that with a timeline. Now, and I'll discuss this display in a moment because that's crucial. But when you go to the currents, the timeline goes away. The timeline goes away. So this is essentially a static picture of the current at one time or an average over some previous times. We'll discuss that in a moment. It leaves showing here ECMWF WAM. That's what it shows. And sure enough, the ECMWF, or there is at the European Community, they have ocean models and they make current models of their own. But I'm not sure that that's what that is. WaveWatch 3, on the other hand, that's WW3. That's a US model. So it's not sure what the currents are. The first guess is, well, let me again, I'm just want to go over a few points in general about the use of these currents. First of all, you can click this and it'll tell you the current. See? So it's 1.3 knots. This is a Gulf Stream, obviously. So the first thing to note is they've labeled the current backwards. Now, what we could call as meteorologists or mariners, we would call it backwards. Certain areas of oceanography, that's the way they do it. But if you're a mariner going in here, don't be confused by that. You wouldn't be confused looking here in the Gulf Stream, but if you're out somewhere in the ocean, somewhere, and you click the button, you may get the wrong data, or you may send a friend of yours who's looking for data from you on the email, may give them the wrong direction. So this is what they're telling you is the direction the current is coming from, whereas the normal convention in marine weather is what direction the current flowing to. So this would be a northerly current here. So that's a minor point, but important still. The other thing is, it's not clear what model this is. Since it's static, the first guess, since it's static, and I assume it's static, well, the fact that these are moving, that's a so-called particle system display. That you can make that move like, oops, sorry, bumped that. You can make this absolutely static map move that way. I'll illustrate that too by loading the Oscar currents into OpenCPN. So this is just an elegant way to illustrate motion that more often than not adds information about it. I can show you a case here in a moment where it could be misleading, actually, though, in this area here, for example. So this is a static picture, and I say it's static because they don't list this. Now, the other general note is I'm putting out here comments on this, or my first impressions of this, and then standing by. I'm sure someone, maybe someone who watches the movies here will know the answer and be able to report it. There is an extensive discussion group that goes with windy.com. Very informative, very knowledgeable people discussing this program. It's used a lot, and it's extremely valuable. But going through that, I can't find any discussions. I did find a proposal that it was Oscar. And Oscar, now I'm sitting here in Seattle. The Oscar currents actually come from right downtown Seattle. The Oscar model is run, or it's not really so much a model as a compilation of data, compilation of measurements, and so I guess you'd call it modeled in some sense. But the Oscar current computations and that Oscar data comes from right downtown Seattle at the moment. And so Oscar is an average over the ocean currents, and we have quite a bit of discussion in our new text, Modern Marine Weather, 3rd edition. We have a lot of discussion of the ocean currents. And now that I've found this on Windy here, we'll expand that and raise some of the questions there. So Oscar is an average over, I think, the past 8 days. They update it, I think, every day, but it's still an average over 8 days, and it's a static picture. And generally, the flow pattern's pretty good, but it tends to be lower. The average currents tend to be a little bit lower than, because they're averaging over 8 days, and the currents change directions a little bit in most places, like out in here and so forth. That's sensitive. They change directions, so the Oscar currents tend to be a little bit lower, maybe not so much right in the Gulf Stream, but in other places they tend to be lower. And so these patterns look a little bit like the Oscar currents, and I'm going to show how you would investigate that. And so the first job is to compare just the speeds of the currents and the speeds and patterns of the currents in various places. And this is a famous eddy inside the Gulf of Mexico here. Sometimes this is broken off and it's all by itself, and then this current just flows up and down and goes this way. Now, it could be right now that this is not right, that this current is actually going up and down like that. And we have one indication that maybe it is we look at the Navy data. Navy puts out a model, they call it a features analysis, and that's almost a starting point for currents in this area. Let me find a picture of it. Here is the southern part of the Navy analysis. And the Navy analysis shows the inner wall of the current coming right up like this. It's not clear. Here, this water is all extremely hot. This is like 85, 86 degrees water all through here. That's why this red is here. Can't quite see the temperatures here, but this water is 85, 86 degrees all through this area. Really hot water. But they draw it like this, which almost implies the current's coming up like this and going around like this. And then we'll come back. The other place I want to look at is this current going up here like this. Then there's two eddies here that you can't really quite see them in this picture, but there's two eddies forming right here. But so this is, and we have links in our book about where you get this Navy data. There's a picture up on the north side, and then there's a south side. This is almost a starting point for the Gulf Stream currents. Let's see. Let me. Here. So the top part of that is like this. Here's the top part of the Gulf Stream from the Navy. And so this is something you can look at. And so here's the area we're going to be looking at a little bit later. And then you can follow through with this. And I think this is sort of like the starting point for understanding what's going on with the currents in that part of the world. But then we can look at actual data. So one quick way to look at the data is I'm using this is LuckGrib, and so here is the what am I looking at? Here's RTOF. Let's go to Oscar. So here's the Oscar currents in this area at this time. Again, remember, exact time doesn't, and there's no sliding here. See, that's the other thing. You could argue that maybe these folks here are using RTOFs. That would seem almost to be logical, that they would use the RTOFs currents. They're readily available, high resolution, and they're once a day for 4.5 days or something like that. But since there's no timeline here, chances are it's not RTOFs. Now we go back here. This is the OSCAR currents, and you can then just spot check it. So it doesn't definitively answer, is it flowing around this way or is it this way? It's just the average currents over this last 8 days looks like this in that area. And in this side, this is kind of like a call here. This shows a current of 4 knots with it about 1 knot on one side, and it's peaking over here at 2.8, 2.7. So there's this eddy here, and whether or not it's truly broken off or not, according to the RTOFs, it's not, I mean, OSCAR is not really clear. If we look at RTOFs call, this is now the Navy, well, it's based on Navy data, but Navy computations, but then it's run again by NOAA. But this shows it cut off. This eddy is cut off. This big Gulf of Mexico eddy is cut off, and this current here is weaker in this area. Here it's weaker, and then the peak down here is again like it's like 2.9. It's stronger than the other one, and this is like about the same. But those two are different. So those are things you can compare. You can compare the RTOFs, you can compare the OSCAR, and then you compare the windies, and we'll try to figure out what's going on with the current model. Then let's just go over here, for example. Here, just in the regular Gulf Stream part, here's RTOFs calling for about like 3 point, right off of okay, let's go off the Lake Okeechobee. Okay, 3.5 knots. 3.5 knots in the RTOFs. You go to the OSCAR. Look at that. OSCAR is at 1 point, maybe gets up to 2 point, right about here. Let me actually put a marker there. Around, I'm going to put a marker. I'm going to put a marker there so I can go back to, there's OSCAR and there's that one. Yeah. So you see this, the color, I don't have the colors matched up exactly here. Well, they are. Okay. So there is about 2.5, and in the RTOFs, 3.5, yeah. So that is a general behavior that you would see. And I want to stress that for a reason in a moment. But generally, the OSCAR currents are lower than what you expect right there at the moment, and in fact, what the RTOFs are going to call for. The OSCAR currents are going to sort of underpredict, probably get the direction and eddies right, but they may be lower on the current speed. Now, the reason I say that is, let's go back to windy. Suppose, windy, right here's windy. Now, this is off of Lake Okeechobee. Now we go here and go like here. You can click this. See, that's 1.7. 1.7, 1.7. So this is calling, I'm addressing the issue is, does the windy use OSCAR? And it's not so obvious, because the OSCAR currents, these currents are even lower than the OSCAR currents. The OSCAR current at that place was about, which one is this? RTOS was 3.6. OSCAR was about 2.6. And then you come to windy. Now you're all the way down to 1.7, 1.8. You see, in that area. So it's even lower than the OSCAR forecast, which puts it like something different. You know, maybe something not OSCAR. But anyway, so I'll just show one other place you can look at this. Oh, then I wanted to show one other trick you could do. You see this eddy here, and this kind of particle display is very nice for emphasizing this. And I want to show that OpenCPN also has this particle display. But the case I wanted to make about that was misleading. You see, if you look at this, the particle display makes this really kind of beautiful pattern here. It all looks logical and one thing. That could be an artifact of this particle display. That's not clear. In other words, this data could really be going up and down like that. We don't know. So we just keep in mind that subtlety. And so then the last thing I wanted to say is just one more example here. So here is here's this picture of this. And if we look, and you can, like in between these, see where these two eddies are adding up in the middle here, you add, click it, there. So that's like 1.4, see, it's getting like maybe peaks at 1.4, and then over here you've got 2.2, and then this combined eddies here are coming up at like 0.8, 1 knot, maybe 1.4, something like that. But when we go to RTOFs in that region, where is that? That's right here. What is this? No, this is OSCAR. See, now OSCAR shows this current, and you read that up here in this corner. RTOFs has this about 0.8, is about the same as they had, and in here they have like 3. So see there, OSCAR has that even that 3, and the RTOFs. Oh, that's interesting. Here's this area. OSCAR is about 3, and you go to RTOFs here. In this area, 3.5. So, yeah. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. So I'm just pointing out things you can, and you can load both the RTOFs and the OSCAR currents. You can get those. Now I'm going to move to OpenCPN and show something and then be done. And leave questions hanging, frankly. I'm just leaving questions hanging. I don't know what model. I can't tell what model the windy ocean currents is at the moment. We'll probably figure that out. But the next point is, let me go to OpenCPN. Where is that? Here. Here is OpenCPN. Now, I've done a trick here, which is we have videos on how to do this. Very nice trick that is easy to do. OpenCPN makes this very easy to do. I have just loaded into this OpenCPN, I've loaded the Navy map. And you have to get the Navy map from that link. Ocean Prediction Center has that. Well, wait a minute. Ocean Prediction Center used to carry these Navy map links, but they've taken that away for some reason. So the only way, I'll put a link in the description which goes to the support page for our book. And since and that's got the links to these Navy maps. And then you can load those Navy maps in here. And then what you can do is then I've just loaded the OSCAR currents, the same one we were looking at in this other LuckGrib. Now you can load those in here. And you see that, what do we got here? The OSCAR flow is, look at that, is going pretty well right up in here, matching the Navy pattern, right like that. And they have a particle display, which I've turned on here. If you zoom it in, you see the particle display. Now on this one, you read the currents up here. So you see 3 knots going up like that. And then if you want, and you can look, if you look very carefully, you can see these 2 eddies here. Now it didn't, and here you see there's 1 knot, and over here is adding up to 2 knots and so on. And so you can play with that. So that's what I'll leave it now, and then the more people that play with this and look at it and study it and compare the models that we have, RTOFs, OSCAR, and there's also NCOM, and there's an NCOM model. And I'll put notes in there about how you can look at that. I didn't get that data. I just discovered this and found that it was interesting to. We want to be careful because we don't know what this. When we look at the windy, we don't know what currents it's doing, and so that's a, and it doesn't agree with the other two models that we do know about. So I'll leave it there for now, and then if hopefully someone does know what currents it's using and can add a comment to explain where do we go to learn about this. One quick thought. I ended, and I'm coming back because I forgot to mention. I mentioned this nice feature of OpenCPN about the particle display that they have, but I forgot one important part, and I didn't even take advantage of it. When you've got these, I've loaded an image, and I've got the particle display. You can go get the control panel here, and then you can change the. See, now this is change the transparency to emphasize what you want to see. So if I turn this all the way over here, let's say there you're seeing just the Navy features map. Then I can go over here and look at just the particle map without seeing that at all, and then just bring it in a little bit. And so it's just a way that you can then play with these controls of the transparency to see better, to look more carefully at what you want to look at. Again, keep in mind these particle displays are not real flow. They're not streamlines, and they're not real flow. So there's some programming decisions made about how these are going to happen, and not in this case, I don't think, but there could be a case where it's misleading. But way more often than not, it's extremely helpful.